friends. Thanks for joining us and welcome back to another virtual Read Aloud book club with Miss Stephanie from the Chester Public Library. That's me. I have my friend Nutmeg here to join me, and we're going to dive into the next part of our Read Aloud for Roald Dahl's The BFG. If you've been listening or reading along with us, we are almost halfway through the book. So we're going to read a big chunk today because the next couple of chapters are all in one piece. So we left off at dream catching. So we had just listened to Journey to Dream Country, and now that's where we are. We're going to jump into dream catching. This is the BFG, so settle in and let's find out what happens next. The big friendly giant put the suitcase on the ground. He bent down low so that his enormous face was close to Sophie's. "From now on, we's keeping still as winky little miceies," he whispered. Sophie nodded. The misty vapor swirled around her, made her cheeks damp, and left dewdrops on her hair. The BFG opened the suitcase and took out several empty glass jars. He set them ready on the ground with their screw tops removed. Then he stood up very straight. His head was now high up in the swirling mist, and it kept disappearing, then appearing again. He was holding the long net in his right hand. Sophie, staring upwards, saw through the mist that his colossal ears were beginning to swivel out from his head. They began waving gently to and fro. Suddenly the BFG pounced. He leaped high in the air and swung the net through the mist with a great swishing sweep of his arm. "Got him!" he cried. A jar! Quick, quick, quick!" Sophie picked up a jar and held it up to him. He grabbed hold of it. He lowered the net. Very carefully, he tipped something absolutely invisible from the net into the jar. He dropped the net and swiftly clapped one hand over the jar. "The top!" he whispered. "The jar top, quick!" Sophie picked up the screw top and handed it to him, and he screwed it on tight, and the jar was closed. The BFG was very excited. He held the jar close to one ear and listened intently. "It's a wink squiffler," he whispered with a thrill in his voice. It's even better. It's a fizz wizard. It's a golden fizz wizard." Sophie stared at him. Oh my, he said, holding the jar in front of him. "This will be giving some little toddler a very happy night when ice blowing in it." "Is it really a good one?" Sophie asked. "A good one," he cried. "It's a golden fizz wizard. It is not often ice getting one of these." He handed the jar to Sophie and said, "Please be still as a starfish now. I was thinking there may be a whole swarm of fizz wizards up here today. Do kindly stop breathing. It was terribly noisy down there." "I haven't moved a muscle," Sophie said. "Then don't," the BFG answered sharply. Once again, he stood up tall in the mist, holding his net at the ready. Then came the long silence, the waiting, the listening, and at last the surprising suddenness came, the leap and the swish of the net. "Another jar!" he cried. "Quick, quick, quick!" When the second dream was safely in the jar and the top was screwed down, the BFG held it to his ear. "Oh no!" he cried. "Oh, mince my maggots! Oh, swipe my swoggles!" "What's the matter?" Sophie asked. "It's a truggle humper!" he shouted. His voice was filled with fury and anguish. "Oh, save our souls!" he cried. "Deliver us from weasels! The devil's dancing on my dibbler!" "What are you talking about?" Sophie said. The BFG was getting more distressed every moment. "Oh, bash my eye bones!" he cried, waving the jar in the air. "I come all this way to get lovely golden dreams, and was I catching?" "What are you catching?" Sophie said. "I's catching a frightsome truggle humper!" he cried. "This is a bad, bad dream. It's worse than a bad dream. It is a nightmare." "Oh dear," Sophie said. "What will you do with it?" "I's never letting it go," the BFG cried. "If I do, then some poor little toddler will be having the most curdle-bloodling time. This one is a real kicksy bog thumper. I's exploding it as soon as I get home." "Nightmares are horrible," Sophie said. "I had one once and I woke up sweating all over." "With this one, you'll be waking up screaming all over," said the BFG. "This one would make your teeth stand on end, and if this one got into you, your blood would be freezing to icicles and your skin would go creeping across the floor." "Is it as bad as that?" "It's worse," cried the BFG. "It's a real wopsy gobswitcher." "You said it was a troggle thumper," Sophie told him. "It is a troggle thumper," cried the exasperated BFG, "but it's also a bog thumper and a grob switcher. It's all three riddled into one. Oh, I'm so glad it's catching it tight. Ah, you wicked beast, you," he cried, holding up the jar and staring into it. "Never more's you going to be bunk-doodling the poor human beanie toddlers." Sophie, who was also staring into the glass jar, cried out, "I can see it. There's something in there." Of course there's something in there, the BFG said. You's looking at a frightsome troggle thumper. But you told me my dreams were invisible. They's always invisible until they's captured, the BFG told her. After that they's losing a little of their invisibility. We seeing this one very clearly. Inside the jar, Sophie could see the faint scarlet outline of something that looked like a mixture between a blob of gas and a bubble of jelly. It was moving violently, thrashing against the sides of the jar and forever changing shape. It's wiggling all over the place, Sophie cried. It's fighting to get out. It'll bash itself to bits. The nastier the dream, the angrier it is getting when it is in prison, the BFG said. It is the same as with wild animals. If an animal is very fierce and you're putting it in a cage, it will make a tremendous rumple-dumpus. If it is a nice animal like the cockatoodle-too or a foggle-frump, it will sit quietly. Dreams is exactly the same. This one is a nasty, fierce, bog-riding nightmare. Just look at him splashing himself against the glass. It's quite frightening, Sophie cried. I would be hating to get this one inside me on a darksome night, the BFG said. So would I, Sophie said. The BFG started putting the bottles back into the suitcase. Is that all? Sophie asked. Are we going? I'm so upset about this trog-humping, bog-thumping grub switcher that I was not wishing to go on. Dream catching is finished for today. Soon, Sophie was back in the waistcoat pocket, and the BFG was racing home as fast as he could go when, at last, they emerged out of the mist and came again onto the hot, yellow wasteland. All the other giants were sprawled out on the ground, fast asleep. Next chapter, the Troggle Humper for the Flesh Lump Eater. They's always having 50 wings before they go scumpering off into a hunt human beings for the evening, the BFG said. He stopped for a few moments to let Sophie have a better look. Giants is only sleeping every then and now, he said. Not nearly as much as human beings. Human beings is crazy for sleeping. Is never going to meet that a human being who's 50 is spending about 20 years sleeping fast? I must admit that it never occurred to me, Sophie said. You should allow it to occur to you, the BFG said. Imagine it, please. This human being who says he is 50 has been fast asleep for 20 years and is not even knowing where he is. Not even doing anything. Not even thinking. It's a funny thought, Sophie said. Exactly, the BFG said. So what I was trying to explain to you is that a human being who says he's 50 is not 50, he's only 30. What about me? Sophie said. I am 8. You is not 8 at all, the BFG said. Human being babies and little chittlers are spending half their time sleeping, so you's only 4. I'm 8, Sophie said. You may think you's 8, the BFG said, but you has only spent 4 years of your life with your eyes open. You's only 4, and please stop higgling me. Titchy little whippersnappers, like you should not be higgling around with an old sage and onions who is hundreds of years more older than you. How much do giants sleep? Sophie asked. These never wasting much time snuzzling. 2 or 3 hours is enough. When do you sleep? Sophie asked. Even less, the BFG answered. I sleep in only once in a blue baboon. Sophie, peeping out from her pocket, examined the 9 sleeping giants. They looked even more grotesque now than when they were awake. Sprawled out across the yellow plain, they covered an area about the size of a football field. Most of them were lying on their backs with their enormous mouths wide open. They were snoring like foghorns. The noise was awful. Suddenly, the BFG gave a jump in the air. By gum frog, he cried. I was just having the most wopsy-whiffling time. What? Sophie said. Wait, he cried. Hold your horse feathers. Keep your shirt on. Just you wait to see what I was going to bring you. He galloped off fast to his cave with Sophie hanging on tight to the rim of the pocket. He rolled back the stone. He entered the cave. He was very excited. He was moving quickly. You stay here where you is in my pocket, Huggy Bee. We's doing this lovely bit of buck swashling both together. He laid aside the dream-catching net, but hung on to the suitcase. He ran across to the other side of the cave and grabbed a long trumpet thing, the one he'd been carrying when Sophie had first seen him in the village. With the suitcase in one hand and a trumpet in the other, he dashed out of the cave. What is he up to now? Sophie wondered. Keep your head up good, the BFG said. Then you will get a fine winkle of what is going on. When the BFG came near to the sleeping giants, he slowed his pace. He began moving softly. He crept on his toes toward the ugly brutes. They were still snoring loudly. They looked repulsive, filthy, diabolical. The BFG tiptoed around them. He went past the gizzard gobbler, the blood butler, the meat dripper, and the flesh and the child chewer. Then he stopped. He had reached the flesh lump eater. He He pointed at him, and he looked down at Sophie and gave her a big wink. He knelt on the ground and very quietly opened the suitcase. He took out of it the glass jar containing the terrible nightmares, Trogglehumper. At that point, Sophie guessed what was going to happen. Ouch, she thought. This could be rather dangerous. She crouched lower in the pocket so that only the top of her head and her eyes were showing. She wanted to be ready to duck out of sight very fast should anything go wrong. They were about 10 feet away from the flesh lump eater's face. The snorting noise he was making was disgusting. Every now and again, a big ball of spit formed between his two open lips, and then it would burst with a splash and cover his face with saliva. Taking infinite care, the BFG unscrewed the top of the glass jar and tipped the squiggling, squirming, faintly scarlet Trogglehumper into the wide end of his long trumpet. He put the other end of the trumpet to his lips. He aimed the instrument directly at the flesh lump eater's face. He took a deep breath, puffed out his cheeks, and then he blew. Sophie saw a flash of pale red go darting towards the giant's face. For a split second, it hovered above the face. Then it was gone. It seemed to have been sucked up by the giant's nose, but it had all happened so quickly, Sophie couldn't be sure. We'd better be skittling away quick to where it is safe, the BFG whispered. He trotted off for about 100 yards, then he stopped. He crouched low to the earth. Now, he said, he's waiting for the gun and flames to begin. They didn't have to wait long. The air was suddenly pierced with the most fearful roar Sophie had ever heard, and she saw the flesh lump eater's body, all 54 feet of it, rise up off the ground and fall back down again with a thump. Then it began to wriggle and twist and bounce about in the most violent fashion. It was quite frightening to watch. Yow! Roared the flesh lump eater. Yow! He's still asleep, the BFG whispered, the terrible troggle-humping nightmares beginning to hit him. Serves him right, Sophie said. She could feel no sympathy for the great brute who ate children as though they were sugar lumps. Save us! Screamed the flesh lump eater, thrashing about madly. He's after me! He's getting me! The thrashing of legs and the waving of arms became more violent by the second. It was an awesome thing to watch such a massive creature having such mighty convulsions. It's Jack, bellowed the flesh lump eater. It's the gruelful, grunches Jack! Jack is after me! Jack is whack-crackling! He's spike-sticking me! He's splash-blunking me! It is the terrible, fried-swiping Jack! The flesh lump eater was writhing about over the ground like some colossal tortured snake. Oh, spare me, Jack! Don't hurt me, Jack! Who is this Jack he's on about? Sophie whispered. Jack is the only human being all giants is frightened of, the BFG told her. They is all absolutely terrified of Jack. They is all hearing that Jack is a famous giant killer. Save me! Screamed the flesh lump eater. Have mercy on this poor little giant! The beanstalk! He's coming at me with a terrible spike-sticking beanstalk! Take it away, I's begging you, Jack! I's praying you not to touch me with your terrible spike-sticking beanstalk! Us giants, the BFG whispered, is not knowing very much about this dreaded human being called Jack. We's knowing that only he's a famous giant killer and that he's owning something called a beanstalk. We's knowing also that the beanstalk is a fearsome thing and Jack is using it to kill giants. Sophie couldn't stop smiling. What is you giggling at? The BFG asked her, slightly nettled. I'll tell you later, Sophie said. The awful nightmare had now gripped the great brute to such an extent that he was tying his whole body into knots. Do not do it, Jack, he screeched. I's not eating you, Jack. I's never catching human beings and eating them. I swear I's never gobbled a single human being in all my wholesome life. Liar, said the BFG. Just then, one of the flesh lump eater's flailing fists caught the still fast asleep, meat-dripping giant smack in the mouth. At the same time, one of his furiously thrashing legs kicked the snoring, gizzard-gulping giant right in the guts. Both the injured giants woke up and leaped to their feet. He's swiping me right in the mouth, yelled the meat dripper. He's bunk-swaddling me smack in the guts, shouted the gizzard gulper. The two of them rushed to the flesh lump eater and began pounding him with their fists and feet. The wretched flesh lump eater woke up with a bang. He awoke straight from one nightmare into another. He roared into battle, and in the bellowing, thumping, rough and tumble that followed, one sleeping giant after another either got stepped upon or kicked. Soon all 9 of them were on their feet, having the most almighty free-for-all. They punched and kicked and scratched and bit and butted each other as hard as they could. Blood flowed, noses went crunch, teeth fell out like hailstones. The giants roared and screamed and cursed, and for many minutes the noise of battle rolled across the yellow plain. The BFG smiled as a big wide smile of absolute pleasure. I's loving it when they's all having a good tough and rumble, he said. They'll kill each other, Sophie said. Never, the BFG answered. Those beasts is always bishing and walloping at one another. Soon it will be there getting dusky, and they'll be galloping off to fill their tummies. They're coarse and foul and filthy, Sophie said. I hate them. As the BFG headed back to the cave, he said quietly, "We certainly was putting the nightmare to good use, though, wasn't we?" "Excellent use," said Sophie. "Well done, you." All right, that's where we're going to stop today. I hope you're enjoying this book like I am. It's a little bit wild. Lots of things are happening. And I want you to think about today, after what we've heard, about what we think Sophie is feeling right now. Is she feeling excited? Is she feeling scared? Is she feeling maybe relief? Like, whew, we got out of that one. I want you to think about and talk about what Sophie might be feeling right now at this point in the story. And I hope you'll join me next time for the next part of our virtual Read Aloud book club as we continue with Roald Dahl's The BFG. Now, Meg and I will see you later. Thanks for joining us. Stay safe and stay healthy.